Be'ez Hashem. Does anybody have a tissue by any chance?
Some right there. Hey, lady. Right. Okay.
Get them in the tissues.
So we're opening right at the beginning of the first parashas Acharei. As you know, we have two parashas joined together this week, Acharei and Kedoshim, but we're starting right at the beginning. Right at the beginning of the first parasha, right. So the pasuk tells us like this: Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe. Hashem spoke to Moshe. AHAREI-MOS Shnei bnei Aaron. After the death or the passing of the two sons of Aaron, B'korvosom Livnei Hashem, when they became close to the Eibusha, or when they approached the Eibusha very closely, Vayomuso, and they died. That's referring back to something that was in the Psukim quite a long time ago in parashas Shmini. Over there in the middle of parashas Shmini, we learned that on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, on the first day when the Mishkan was put up permanently on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, then there occurred a thing that Nodov Vavihu, they were two sons of Aaron the Kohen, they took keteras. You know what keteras is? Incense. In like containers for the incense, and they went in to the Heichel. They went into the sanctuary, and according to many great Meforshim, they actually went into the Holy of Holies. They put the keteras on the mizbeach for the keteras, which was inside the Heichel, but it was outside the parashas, outside the curtain, and there was a curtain hiding the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. That's where the Ark was. In the Ark with the Meluchos were inside there. And they actually went in there. They left the keteras on the mizbeach, and then they went inside, according to many Meforshim. And so Aish came down from heaven, and they died on the spot. You remember the whole story. And there's a whole big long discussion as to how Aaron took it and how did he react, and so on and so forth. A very amazing reaction on the part of Aaron, according to their father. But they passed away. The holy fire from heaven that came down onto the mizbeach and ate and consumed the keteras that was on the mizbeach, came down from heaven, but they were also consumed by the fire. They were only burnt in their neshama. Their gufim remained whole, both according to Rashi and other. It's apparent in the psukim like that, that only the penimis they were burnt, but their bodies remained whole. But the fire, Rashi explains that the fire went into their nostrils, and it caused their neshamas to go out of their bodies, and they were left lifeless, and they had to be carried out. Moshe explained to their relatives that they should carry them out of the Mikdash. So that's what we're referring to here, the Mises B'nai Aaron. But that was a long time ago. In the meantime, we've learned Parashat Tazria, and we've learned Parashat Matzorah, all about the, how to call it, I don't like to use the word leprosy, because that's not a proper translation. All the negoyim, we'll use the Hebrew word, that can occur, and then the way the Matzorah becomes purified if he's seen to have been healed from with a whole series of inyanim. And now we've come to a new parsha, and the parsha begins with a reference to the fact that the Bnei Aaron passed away in that way. So let's see what's it got to do. So immediately the next pasuk says, "Vayom Hashem el Moshe, daber el Aaron achicha." You should talk with Aaron your brother. V'al yovoi b'chol eish al hakodesh, mebeis laparecha. You should talk with him in a way that you must warn him that he's not able to come at any time that he should want inside the parecha. Like we said, these two brothers, not of you, they went inside the parecha. So the warning is that you mustn't do that anymore. You can only come inside the parechas under certain conditions and at certain time. And the pasuk goes ahead to tell us that what day of the year is it possible to do that, and who.
Yom Kippur.
Yeah, that's only possible for the Kohen Gadol and on Yom Kippur. Then it's possible to go inside the parecha. Over any other time, no way, forbidden. With all the details, how Aaron is able to come in. He's got to have certain clothes on. He's got to also bring keteras with him, but in a very special way, and a whole series of details that we learn. So the question that occurs to the intelligent reader: what did Hashem say to Moshe in that first statement? It's written, "Yidaber Hashem al Moshe, AHAREI-MOS," after the passing away. But so what's that got to do with it? If you want to tell Moshe something, why do you have to refer back to the fact that the two sons of Aaron passed away? What's that got to do with it? And then he says that why did they pass away? How did they pass away? Because they came close to Hashem and they died. And then stop. And then all of a sudden, Vayemer Hashem el Moshe, a new statement on the part of Hashem to Moshe, and he says that nobody's allowed to come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim only on a special time of the year and only under special conditions. So he could have started with that. If that's what he wants to tell us, he could have started with that. Why does he tell us this whole statement at the beginning, which doesn't seem to have any details? It's written, "Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe." It's not written what he said. So if he told him what we learn in the next pasuk, that's a pasuk on its own. That's a separate speech on the part of Moshe on the part of Hashem to Moshe. So as is all the question, what did he say the first time? When he spoke to him, it's not written what did he say. And now, in the second pasuk, he starts telling us what did he actually want to say to Moshe that he should tell Aaron and all the Kenim how they should conduct themselves. Of Amira, the question asked on the part of the intelligent reader, okay, what was hidden? What did Moshe really say in that first dibur? It's not written what did he say. It's just written that he did speak to Aaron, but not written any details whatsoever. The details occur in the next statement. Vayom Hashem, then he said what he had to say. So what did he say the first time around? So So comes along Rashi at the beginning of the whole parasha. Rashi says, interesting sort of parable. Rashi says that this can be compared to a doctor, a roifer, that he came into a choile, came into a sick man, and he said to him, listen, in order for you to get better, you're not allowed to drink cold drinks or things of that nature, and you shouldn't sit in cold baths, a tachav. Rashi mentions a thing called a tachav, which means a cold bath. You shouldn't sit in cold baths, and you'll get better. If you don't do those things, then hopefully you'll get better. A second doctor came into him, and he says, well, don't drink cold and don't lay in cold baths, because if you do that, then you're likely to die like Pliny died when he did that. Yeah? In other words, if you do those two things, then you could die just like Pliny, somebody died. So Rashi says, who had he caught was Mazarez, who caused the sick man to really take care of what he's doing? The first doctor or the second doctor?
Second one.
Huh? The second one. Why? Because the second one said, don't do these, because you're likely to die like Pliny died. Meaning that he knows that Pliny died, and so he says to himself, oh, wow, if I do these things, I'm likely to die like he did. And so I'm going to be very careful. So the second doctor was what we call Mazarez. In Hebrew, Lazarez means make the guy very energetic and careful of what he's doing, much more than the first one did. The first one just said to him, don't do it, it's not kedai for you. So, ask yourself the question, what does Rashi want with that what's he want with this whole thing? So Rashi's coming to answer the question that we asked. Rashi's telling us that first speech that Hashem made to Moshe Rabbeinu, which doesn't seem to have any content in it at all, it just says that Hashem spoke to him but doesn't say what, and then it starts saying what Hashem did say to him. The Rashi said that first statement does have something inside it. And the first statement is that the doctor told him a very important thing. And the doctor said that there was once Bnei Aaron, which you know about them, they were already a passage of time before, and you know what happened to them? They died. Kosam kavosam Hashem v'yomosa. What I'm going to tell you now is that you should listen and be very careful in order that you shouldn't die also like they died. So what are you going to do to be careful not to die like they did? Don't go in the whole time, and don't always go into the Kodesh HaKadosh only on your kippur and only under certain conditions and so on. Then you'll be all right. But if you do that, then you'll die like these guys did. But the first statement was just saying, listen, don't do what I'm about to tell you, because if you do, you might die like Pliny died. And so when Aaron hears that, that makes a very deep zeros in him compared to the whole in. That's what Rashi is explaining. If Amela Rashi is telling us then that the first dibur must have contained something, and what was it? It was a special, how do you call it, ziruz, energizing of Aaron HaKohen, that he shouldn't go any time into the Kodesh HaKadosh, because he might die, or he would die, like his two sons died. So I said, that's a very powerful way of warning him. And then he tells him the details of what he wants to tell him not to do. Don't always go, and don't this and don't that. And he tells him the details. But first of all, he was Mazarazim. he gave him a big zeros, and he referred back to his sons having died. That's how Rashi explained it. So we do know what he said in the first Dibur. Yeah, so where did Rashi get that that's what he said? Because l'chora, Aaron could have just said, Hashem could have just started off. The whole parsha was saying to Aaron, listen, don't go always into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, don't do this and don't do that, only wear these and these begodim, and only once a year on Yom Kippur. He didn't need to say this whole thing. V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe b'kol vosam lifnei Hashem v'yomu. So he didn't need to say that b'klal. So I asked myself the question: if we go a little bit, we think a little bit deeper. What was Moshe telling Aaron that if you do this, you're likely to die like Pliny did? So, Aaron was a very great person, and Aaron himself could put two and two together, and he was the one who lost the people, they were his sons. So, he doesn't just need to be told that. If Hashem wants to be Mazares, Aaron, he doesn't, as it were, need to threaten him and say, listen, if you do this, you're likely to die like your sons did. We have to say that there's some deep message hidden in this, what Hashem said to Aaron, which tells us how they came to this and how they died. What was the reason that led to their death? And once Aaron understands that, then he'll understand that he might be able to go in the same way they did, but he won't. He'll be very careful not to do it, because he wants to avoid what happened to his son. And he has to be told what was like the inner story that he should know, not to be like that, because it might end up in him going the way his sons did, and then they passed away. And that wasn't not a good thing. Or it's not a thing that we could assume is a good aim in its own right. So we need to work out what was it that the Bnei Aaron did, what was hidden in these two sons, in their actions and their activities that wasn't good and it led to them passing away. So if you're an intelligent reader, so you say, well, let's look back there in the parsha, in Parsha Shmini, and let's see what Rashi or somebody tells us over there why they passed away. So if you look over there in the parsha, in Parsha Shmini, it is to try and work out, what did they do wrong? What wasn't so good? And you'll find Rashi says all sorts of rather strange things. The Rashi says one thing is that they paskened a halacha in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. And since they were only Talmidim, you're not allowed to pasken a halacha in front of your Rav without his permission. You're not allowed to pasken. And so they were moirim halacha bifnei Rabbo. Very unusual thing. Doesn't seem to. That's the reason, what's it got to do with it? And secondly is, another possibility, says Rashi over there, that they were drunk a bit from wine when they went in. They were shasui yayin. And according to that, Pshat, it makes good sense, that later in this parasha, he warns the Bnei Aaron they must never drink wine when they go into the Mikdash.
That's probably right.
So that seems to have some sort of connection with it. So the reason they passed away is they drank wine. Once again, what is so, that's a reason the first day when they put up the Mishkan and the whole thing, it's such an amazing day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, to take away their lives. what's going on here? So therefore, very briefly, I want to say that according to what the Rebbe has to say about that whole parsha over there, that in Emerson, these Bnei Aaron were very, very elevated people. They were very great tzaddikim, and they were really top-notch. And Moshe Rabbeinu later said to Aaron, after they died, Moshe Rabbeinu said, these guys are holier even than me and you. Now, if anybody said to you, who is the holiest people you can imagine that have been by the Yidden, you'd probably say Moshe and Aaron, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. And yet, nonetheless, Moshe said to Aaron that these guys are holier even than I. So if they're so tremendously holy, what are they doing passing away? And therefore, Rashi says, we have to say it was like some side issue that didn't really have to do with the main issues. In other words, the fact that they took the Keteras, and the Pasuk said Hashem didn't command them that they took the Keteras. They took the Keteras out of their own free will. Well, they weren't commanded to take that Keteras, and they took it into the Holy of Holies. That's okay. Hashem didn't command them to do that, but with the actual bringing of the Keteras, Hashem was okay with that. Hashem was makabel there, because they're very holy people, and they meant the best in the world. And that's what made the Shekhinah come down, and the Shekhinah dwelt, and Aish came down onto the Mizbeach, and it consumed the things on the Mizbeach, and everything. So everything's fine. Must be some side reason that was not kilo 100% okay, and for that reason, since they're great people who make a small fault, Hashem reckons with it, like the Gemara tells us, that people who are really great, if they do a little small thing, they can be very severely punished, because the greater you are, then the smallest fault is a huge issue. So therefore, if we look over there in Rashi, all we learn is that these guys were really, really very great. And yet there was some side issue which led to their passing away. We need to sort of understand, how does this fit into the fact now that Moshe Rabbeinu is he's warning Aaron that you must be very careful not to be like your sons, that they passed away. How does that all connect together with the fact that he spoke again in this way, warning Aaron that he shouldn't be like his sons and he shouldn't pass away? And that's a real way of making him very careful what he's going to be doing. So we need to sort of examine what is Moshe Rabbeinu's message to Aaron. What is he, in this passage, which doesn't really say what it is, but there's something there. What is hidden there? What is he really telling? So I apologize, this all sounds a bit complicated, but I'm going to make it very simple.
Sometimes the things that are most powerfully
I'm going to make it simpler. I'm going to simplify it.
What was that? I didn't. What was the last question? The last question?
I didn't ask any question. I'm just saying, what is the hidden message that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving over here to Aaron? Okay. And that's really Mazaras him, and that's got to do with their passing away. So let's take a look at the Pasuk. And the Pasuk says, after they passed away, but then it says something it didn't really need to say. If I'm just warning them not to pass away like the sons of Aaron passed away, to say that he said this to them after their passing away in a way that he should pay careful attention. But he doesn't say that. He said after they passed away, the two sons of Aaron, and then he said, but koravosom livnei Hashem v'yomusa, that they came very close to Hashem and they died. Now, as for the question, why does he need to put that in? I mean, he could just said, after they passed away, Moshe said to him, and then he said to him, kaf. What's the sin here that they came close to Hashem and they died? He's already said they died. It's written, AHAREI-MOS, AHAREI-MOS. So we know they died. I mean, we know from before, but being retold that they died. What does he add again by the Lashon Vayomusu? And they died. We know that. Elamai, there's something hidden here, and I'm going to ask a question and see if you guys have got any ideas. And that is, he says, what was the whole problem? Bekorvosom lifnei Hashem v'yomusa. They became very close to Hashem and they died. Are you okay with that? That makes 100% sense. First of all, as we just mentioned, why does he need to say it for close? But if he's already saying it, then what sort of sense does that make? No. Normally, if you get close to Hashem, what happens to you?
You die.
Live.
Normally, the closer you are to Hashem, the closer you are to Hashem, the more you're alive.
Right, right.
In the real way. The closer you, Hashem is the mocker of life. Hashem doesn't present himself to be he who kills people. Hashem is the mocker of life. So the closer you get to Hashem, it should be more alive.
Theoretically.
So what's it written here? That the whole problem is, Bekorvosom lifnei Hashem v'yamusu. That's the whole problem. That they got close to Hashem and they died. He's not telling me just that they died. That I already know. He says it himself. AHAREI-MOS. They've already died. So what does he say? Bekorvosom lifnei Hashem v'yamusu. V'yamusu must be like a result of something that happened to them. And what's that? Bekorvosom lifnei Hashem. That's like a biur why they died. So I sold the Shailan. You guys are all verschlafen. I sold the Shailan. How can you become close to Hashem and you die?
They came out of their kalim.
Huh?
They went out of their kalim. They went out of their kalim.
Very nice. And then that's an intelligent remark. He said they went out of their kalim. Now that's a very intelligent remark. But so what? You know, let's say that they went out of their kalim. Let's say. So what? You know, what did they do wrong? You know.
They didn't.
And the fact that the result of what they did was Vayomusu, that they passed away, and he stresses that. He said, this is the real reason why they passed away. And from that, he's sort of hinting that there was like something wrong with it. Because Hashem normally doesn't knock people off for what they do. You know? Unless there's something really, obviously terrible.
Maybe.
But here, if they were coming close to Hashem, what's he doing? Knocking them off, you know?
Was the Keturah
So
wrong?
he says, yeah, they got out of their kalim. Okay, see, they got out of their kalim. No, it's what? Therefore. And then it's very not to be understood. And therefore, what we're going to deal with now, just briefly, is, you know, what happened here? What is becoming close to Hashem that led to the opposite of life? So, in order to understand that, we didn't learn last week.
It's a new semester.
So everybody say, oh yes, well we weren't here, you understand? That's true. Although we got a slight debt that came, we have to refer back to the last week's part. I'm sure you won't be angry if we refer back to last week's. You might have a complaint that we got enough on our heads. We're trying to understand what he's saying about this week's parasha. We had to get involved in last week's parasha. But let's take a look. Last week's parasha was about the Matzorah. The Matzorah is a person that has one of these Nagoyim. So ask yourself the question, what are these Nagoyim? So Rashi tells us, and the Medrash, and it's even mashma in the Gemara, that Lashon Hora, if you talk Lashon Hora, which you must never do, by the way, that's what causes the Nagoyim. Or it's Gastos Haruach, Rashi says. Another problem is you think you're a whole, important entity, you're a whole birth on yourself, you hold from yourself what they call gaiva, conceit in English. Gastos Haruach in the Lashon of the Gemara also leads to Nagoyim. There's quite a number of things which can lead to Nagoyim. So, I saw the shaila, why does it come out on the flesh of a person? Normally, a person can do all sorts of improper things, and, he looks on the outside a perfectly normal individual like everybody else. You don't all of a sudden see that something appears in his hair or on his face or on his body or vice versa. You follow? So it comes along the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, and the truth is, this is based on a Rambam. The Rambam says it in his Pirush LaMishnayos, in Pirkei Avos. He wrote a whole thing called the Shmeina Prokim, the 8 chapters, and over there in the 8 chapters, the Rambam says this particular thing. And that is that at the beginning of the Nagoyim, in Pasha Tazria, at the beginning of the Nagoyim, all the plagues or lepers or whatever you call them, it's written right at the very beginning, Odom, Veidav Hashem al Moshe v'Aaron Leima, Odom, Ki yeh bo'er v'sorei, se'eis, or sapachas, or baheret, all the different Nagoyim. Now, if you guys ever learned anywhere, the name Adam, Odom, is that a very, how do you call it, complimentary term for a person, a high term, or is it a sort of a bit of a play-down term?
It's a high term.
Very good. Tzvi has answered very properly. Odom is a high name for Hashem, for a person. There are 4 names, like species names for men. One is Odom, one is Ish, one is Gever, and one is Enosh. And Odom is the highest of all of them. I'm not going into, we're short of time, so I'm not going to go into what all the others imply, but Odom is the highest of all the Madrega. And there was the Shiur Klali brings down in his great work. You've heard of the Shiur Klali. He was in this area, he lived in Tveria. He was also in Tvaz at one time, the Shiur Klali. But his main living place was Tveria. The Shiur Klali writes that the word Odom means, for the word to compare, Domeh is to compare. Adam is like I'm saying, Adameh le'elyon. I will compare myself, Adameh, I will compare myself to the high, which is Hashem. I compare myself to the one on high. In other words, that Odom is that aspect of a human being, how his mom is compared to Hashem. How his mom is, like it's written at the beginning of Braces, that Hashem said, Na'aseh Odom b'tzelmeinu kidmu seinu. I'm going to make man like me. Right? So Odom is the highest of that position. So do you have any kashas?
Catches?
Conscious.
What's a Odom?
Adam means ground. dirt.
Yeah, what's a Adam? If we're calling a mensch Adam, we're talking about his higher state. And what's he do getting the goyim?
4, 5, 6. You only have to know 4.
What's he doing with the neck?
What we refer to as it's on the Sexenius.
Huh?
That's basically that talks about in the Devar Malchus. I think it's Devar Malchus. Basically, in the Devar Malchus, it talks
Yeah,
about
yeah. Oh, you're right. It was in last week's Torah.
What was it? Basically, there's some person that's
Yeah, you're right.
so
right.
high.
Yeah. We're coming to that. I don't know, he very rightfully points out that the Rebbe mentions about this in last week's Torah Malchus.
Tazvim Mitzayra.
And the Rebbe says over there that really the Nagoyim come to high people. They come to very elevated people. And Davki people who have reached Madrega are Odom. But what happens is that maybe there's certain little things way down towards the bottom of their Aveda which they didn't finish with. They didn't quite complete. So, by a normal person, he just goes ahead and everything's... Because since he's not holding very high, what he didn't finish yet of is no great significance. I mean, it is for him, but it's not really. However, somebody who's very high, if he's got something left over that he didn't quite finish, well, that can show up. And so what happens is, it shows up on his body. Because he's such a high guy, it shows up on his body. It shows up on his body. So, the Rambam writes over there in the Shemini HaProchim, the same thing. The Rambam says that Adam is the shleimus of the Min Anushi, and he said this happens to somebody who's very high, and it's like something that occurs at the bottom of his garment, sort of a little bit, but it shows up on his body. And he said that is a Ma'aser Nes. The Rebbe brings it in the Sikha over there, and the Rebbe says that that's a Nes. That something where you're holding in Ruchnias should be able to show up on your body, that's a Nes. That's something miraculous. And so then he goes on to point out in detail, the Rebbe, that really the Nagoyim, these leper things that appear on people's bodies, are very high madrigas, a very high level in Elkus and in Ruchnias. But they're not the, how they call it, the tachlis of everything. They're not the most ultimate what Hashem really wants. But they're very high. They're very high, and they belong at the beginning in Kedusha. It's just that they, because there's something that's not really the ultimate kavanah of Hashem, therefore they come out, dafki by elevated people, in a sort of a thing on their body. It actually shows up and tells what it's about on their body. Now that's the Nagoyim, just very briefly. very briefly. So, ask yourself the question, what could be, by such a high person, an elevated guy, what could be something not right with him that it would come out, nonetheless, at the bottom of his madrigas, and it would show up on his body. It would actually be visible on him that he's not Peseda in that Indian. He's a Adam. Adam is a very perfect sort of man. What could be not Peseda?
Lashon Hara.
Huh?
We said Lashon Hara, right?
So he spoke Lashon Hara. But do you really think a guy like this would just talk Lashon Hara?
Yeah, we learn it from Miriam. We learn it from Miriam.
So what is Lashon Hara? What is the inner story of Lashon Hara? Lashon Hara is when speech goes out from a person, but it's not really the way it should be. It leads in the wrong direction. So the Lashon Hora of this person is that he talks, but he talks in a way that doesn't create kosher kelim. So normally when we speak in Pasuk Torah, in Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe points out that normally when we speak, if we speak according to Torah, and we learn a lot of Torah, excuse me you guys, if you don't mind, don't talk now, if you don't mind, okay? And it won't do any harm if you hear the rest of the shiur. It won't do you any harm either. If I'm in normally when a person speaks, if he's learning Torah, then what he does is make good kelim all around him. Because the words go out of his mouth and they form vessels, and those vessels bring down divinity into them. So that wherever you speak, you make a lot of good things, and divinity comes down into the world, and people wake up and they start getting involved in Kedusha. And people get even attracted to Kedusha. But if you don't learn Torah, and there's something maybe lacking in your whole approach, then the kelim that you make don't work. They don't bring down Halakus. And on the contrary, they don't really carry out the full kavanah. So what do I mean by that? Ultimately speaking, we've got to get to the central point, and then we'll sort of try and build a bit more in detail. What could be this problem with this Odom? He's a very high person. What could be the problem with him that he sort of hasn't completed, something's not right there, and it forms a nega, and when he speaks, he doesn't create good kelim. In other words, I want to give you a perfect example. Take the Rebbe. The Rebbe spoke, and wherever the Rebbe's letters and his sichas got told about, or they reached anywhere in the world, things started happening. People built Bati Chabad, people became Bali Tshuvas. It could be the whole reason why you guys, I'm including myself in that, Bavadai. The whole reason why we're sitting around this table, because the Rebbe said certain things. Yeah. And when the Rebbe said what he said, that made certain kelim, and divine light came down into that kelim, and amongst that divine light was our little neshomas. Got drawn down into a kli, and so we found our way into where we are today. Aber mehr in philosophy there that if you're a person like the Rebbe, then what you say creates vessels, and those vessels create other neshamas. They bring down divinity in a way that people react. And therefore, if you've noticed, by a good person, I saw it in Australia over 50 years ago, by my mashpia and his son, that people used to come into the shul looking for them. They didn't have to go around, say, listen, guys, I've got something to teach everybody. Do you want to listen? But people would come looking for them. People get drawn. Where does Gilad people get drawn? Why? Because you make a kli. By what you say, you create kelim, particularly if you talk divrei Torah, you create kelim, and that makes a lot of eloquence. So what's wrong with this guy, that he's an Odom, and nonetheless he's got a nega, came, something a little bit not perfect or something not good. So I want to drop you guys a bomb.
Why is there no nega today? Why is there no tsaras today? Why is there no tsaras today?
Nowadays, why is there no tzaras?
Why is it a tzaras?
Nowadays.
That's another Indian. The main thing we're concerned about that it is. You follow? What are the different colors?